In thinking about the 16th century as the early modern period, one of the most important developments was the emergence of new kinds of art, new genre, a kind, which these kinds of art, such as landscape, are meant to draw viewers into entirely secular meanings. So a great example is Albrecht Althofer's Danube landscape, depicting the Danube river valley of the Germanic regions. So this is a painting where we see grand trees framing the space, a winding road that leads us back through forest toward a distant castle and mountains, as well as a vast sky and a feeling of weather in the way we see the form of the clouds, the light, the sense of movement of wind and air. There is no religious subject matter here whatsoever, at least not directly. As your textbook explains, there is a sense of kind of God's creation as a majestic realm, potentially implicit, but no explicit religious story or religious figures, no Virgin Mary or baby Jesus to worship or remember, nor is there even a humanist story. So I put this quote from the textbook, "Landscape with or without figures became a popular theme in the 16th century." And we'd already seen an interest in landscape and nature in an artwork like Botticelli's Primavera. But of course, the landscape, even though it has very real feeling orange trees and space, and it deals with wind and other natural weather systems, it's still really a storytelling artwork that focuses on the human being and the human figure. The Danube River Valley doesn't. It focuses on place, on the poetics of place and space. This is hugely important in terms of what becomes modern art, because it's the beginning of the autonomous artwork. Autonomous meaning independent, a self-sufficient object. We have not been seeing self-sufficient objects. We've seen triptychs made for sacred places. We've seen sacred altarpieces. We have seen frescoes painted on rooms and ceilings. It has been much less frequent to see an autonomous artwork. Yes, the Arnolfini portrait was, but this is an artwork that's small enough scale to be easily purchased and portable, to be able to move around. The Arnolfini portrait is a very large artwork. So as a portable artwork that's autonomous, this is the beginning of what will be the culture of the easel painting. This is an exhibition at the Musée d'Orsay, and this is a painting by Van Gogh, the modern artist who paints easel paintings, small-scale paintings, about 24 inches by 36 inches, so that the artist can make many of them and develop a particular statement. This is beginning when you see something like the Danube landscape. This is also a new attitude toward nature, which is very tied to the beginnings of science. The idea that nature is interesting, beautiful, wonderful, worthy of observation, worthy of understanding. Previously in Christian Europe, nature was mostly treated as fearsome, as hostile and threatening. Devotion to nature was a pagan pre-Christian idea that we had but in the original tribes before they were Christianized, or in the Greek and Roman world. In terms of nature, among the most wonderful landscape paintings of the time are these by Peter Bruegel the Elder, one of the great painters of the 16th century North. A series of 6 paintings that represent the changing seasons of the year. So they sort of call back to the Trois Riches Heures, where we had the calendar of the years. And like that, we see peasants, we see lower class people at work, taking lunch, sleeping exhausted after their work, the hunters, And even though these figures are very interesting and we can focus in on them and be very intrigued by their actions, their attitudes, what they're communicating, what they're doing, nevertheless, the landscape is really the main deal. In fact, there are questions about the attitude toward class, whether these people are just sort of showing the wealth of the land by being workers who enhance the wealth through their labor. The landscape conveys the changing conditions of nature in the changing seasons, the feeling of winter, the feeling of fall. And I've put a phrase here, inverted composition. I'll explain that in a moment. It has to do with space. I want you to appreciate the kind of space that Bruegel creates in his winter scene, or this scene that I put as a comparison for inverted composition. The space is immense. It goes way back, and it's very broad. It's a panoramic space, a kind of all-encompassing space from the sky where the birds are sort of darting and swooping down to the distant sight of the people skating on the ponds. And this is interesting because it is very much a space that uses the insights of perspective, linear one-point perspective, to create that depth. But it also plays with space in a way that we didn't see in those Italian Renaissance painting. It plays with a tension between what we see here in the foreground and the way it cuts away to a broad vista that then turns and goes back. So the space seems enormous. It seems to take in the vastness of nature and the smallness of the human being. That's a point of these paintings. Human beings struggle through the snow to hunt the rabbits that will be their dinner, to make the fire. They do play skating on the pond, but they're sort of small and even a little lost in the vast space of the natural world. And in terms of inverted composition, the idea is that here, this is a way in which an artist like Bruegel can use space, deep space, perspectival space, to actually make very important things very small, such as these legs right here. This is the landscape with the fall of Icarus, the story of the Greek myth of Daedalus and his son Icarus. Daedalus makes wings that allow him and Icarus to fly toward the sun, but Icarus gets too close, the wings melt, and he falls into the sea. That is what's happening. But it's very powerful that the story, the humanistic story that would have been the whole big deal in Italy, is now reduced to this little spot of legs disappearing into the water as he drowns, as if you almost wouldn't notice. So I want you to look at the poem that's juxtaposed with this painting on the page to think about how meaningful that choice of inverted composition was.